It's week 16, and we're going to talk about the ILS and preservation. We've covered a lot of ground in this course. We've talked about what collection management is and why it's important to do it. We've explored how to know your community, curriculum, and collection in order to make collection management decisions that best meet the needs of your users, and the important role that the collection management policy plays in the decision-making process. We've considered the variety of acquisition methods, learned about cataloging and classification, and even created catalog records and explored RDA a little bit. So what's left? Well, in this module, we're going to talk about two very disparate things: the integrated library system and preservation of materials. The ILS is the vehicle we use to keep electronic records of what we have available in the library and where we can find it, when it was purchased, what we paid for it, who has it checked out, and so on. But before we discuss that, we're going to talk about the last step in the acquisitions process, and that is the physical processing of materials to preserve them, make them available for circulation, and repair or replace them when they get damaged. Preservation is about long-term use and viability of a resource. It's not just about repair, but about preparing our physical resources to be able to sustain and survive the use we hope they get. Before a book or DVD or manipulative can go out into the library and be available for circulation, it needs some basic processing. Now, you may wonder what this processing has to do with preservation, but this is actually where the preservation of materials begins. How a resource is processed can have a huge bearing on the longevity of the resource. So let's talk about the basic elements that are necessary for processing library resources, as well as some of the discretionary options. So different formats will require different types of processing procedures, but the basics for every resource are these. The property stamp. It's important to stamp each part of a resource with a property stamp. This identifies the resource as belonging to your library and has been very helpful in getting materials back to the library to which they belong. Additionally, it sometimes helps to cut down on theft, as a person is less likely to try to sell a resource that has the stamp of a library on it. I remember working in a public library, and we often would get resources from different from libraries that didn't belong to us, and we would mail them back because we knew where they belonged because of that property stamp. So where should the property stamp be placed? I recommend placing it in at least two different places, of course, depending on the resource. Some parts of resources are going to be too small to put it in two different spots. Before a book, the title page is a really good place to put the property stamp because somebody can just open the book really quick and see it. Now, I know that your book has mentioned putting the property stamp on a specifically numbered page, and I know that used to be the practice here at Murray State University to try to prevent theft, sort of, secretly hiding the property stamp where only you knew it could be found. But I don't think that makes sense. We want people to be able to see the property stamp, and that, I think, is a better theft deterrent than hiding it. So put it on the title page, and then stamp on the text block somewhere, either the top or the bottom. And that way, when the books are in a stack, you can look really quickly and see that there's a property stamp on there and who it belongs to. That cannot be removed. The title page can be removed, but stamping it on the text block itself. So the text block is when the book is closed and you've got all the pages together, and it makes a pretty solid surface. So stamping it there, it can't be removed, and it makes it more easily identifiable. You'll want to make sure that each piece of a multi-part item has been stamped. For instance, make sure there's a stamp or label with the library's name on it on a CD, as well as the booklet in the CD case. That way, if the pieces get separated, we can put them back together. We know what they belong to. So next is essential to put a spine label with the call number on each piece of the resource. So on a book, it should be at the bottom of the spine. If the call number is too wide to fit on the spine, it should be put on the front cover in the lower left-hand corner. So try to put it at a consistent height from the bottom of the book, as this makes it easier to shelf read when the spine labels are all in the same place on the spine. So if you've got, and you can look at your shelves in the library and quickly see if they're all in the same location on each spine, you have this nice row of spine labels on the shelves. But if they're not put in, the same distance up from the bottom of the spine, then one spine label will be higher or lower than the next one to it, and you kind of have to jump your eyes up and down to locate the spine label. It just makes it a little more challenging to shelf read. And it doesn't look as neat and tidy. So cover the spine label with a label protector in order to extend the life of the spine label and keep the label from peeling and fading. There are some labels that you don't have to cover, it just depends on the surface of the book and if the label's going to adhere really well or not. For media, a spine label on the case is essential, because then you'll be able to see it when it's sitting on the shelf. And you'll also want to to either write or put a label on the CD or DVD, as well as any accompanying materials. And that way we can get them back together if they're separated. The barcode is another essential element to use in processing materials. The barcode uniquely identifies each resource and is used for circulating it, as well as batch processing records in the integrated library system. Excuse me. You'll want to determine where the barcode should go based on how it will be used. So, for instance, if you're going to automate inventory, it's best to have the barcode on the outside of the resource, the outside of the case or the book, so you don't have to take each book or DVD off the shelf, open it up in order to scan the barcode. But again, this is based on what works best in your library, and you have many options, each with their strengths and weaknesses. So the next elements in processing library materials can be optional, depending on what you do in your library and what your needs are. The security tag or strip is useful, of course, only if your library has a security system. So the security strip keeps people from accidentally or intentionally walking out of the library without checking out the resource. Or actually, it deters it. Sometimes it still happens, but it's a good deterrent. You'll want to follow the manufacturer's directions on the placement of the strip for the effectiveness of it. It's always a good idea to hide it, if possible, to prevent someone from removing it. When I worked in the public library, people thought that the barcode was a security strip, and we would find barcodes taken out of books or peeled off the DVD case and laying around because they thought that would let them go through the security gates without setting them off. You might also want to add special labels to the spine in order to identify award winners, reading levels, genre, or any other type of characteristics of the resource. Library systems now have the ability to print out a list of titles checked out along with the dates they're due. So it really is only essential to include a date due slip or label if you don't have the ability to print out a slip for the patron. Protective book covers are often used to keep the dust jackets from becoming torn or lost. The benefits of an attractive cover need to be weighed against the costs in terms of time and expense to determine if it's worth it to cover the dust jacket. So this is a very legitimate consideration. At the library I worked at, the university library I worked at, students complained about the lack of new books all the time, and we really couldn't understand why they were saying we didn't get new books, because we purchased new books every year. But then we started to look at them on the shelf without the book covers and realized that they looked just like the older books. They're not pretty, they're not attractive. So what we did is we started keeping the dust jackets on. We didn't cover them or tape them to the book. We printed out 2 spine labels, so one went on the spine of the book and the other on the spine of the jacket. And that way, if the jacket got old or torn and we had to remove it, or it got lost, we wouldn't lose the spine label with the loss of the jacket. And printing out an extra spine label isn't really going to cost a whole lot extra. So we found that complaints for no new books went down drastically, and the use of these newer books actually went up because they were more attractive to our students. And also there's information often on book jackets that tells a little bit about the book, and so it's helpful for a user to be able to look at that and read that and see if it's something that they really want. If paperbacks are going to get a lot of use, it's also wise to laminate the covers so they don't wear out as quickly. And again, this will depend on the expected use of the resource. So we would often purchase, well, in our collection development policy, our intention was to purchase paperbacks instead of hardbacks because they were less expensive. And so for ones that we knew that we wanted to keep them in the collection long term, we would laminate them. For books that we knew were, like maybe popular fiction books or the less expensive books, we wouldn't laminate. So we'd save some pennies on that because we knew they just wouldn't get the usage that other materials got, and so those materials warranted laminating. So again, these are decisions that you're just going to need to make locally depending on usage of your materials and your budget, of course. This leads us to the next part of processing, spine tape. So even if you don't laminate paperbacks, it is still a good idea to use to tape the spines with book tape to make sure that the hinges are a little bit more durable. Cases can be purchased for media that will keep multiple parts together and sometimes be more durable than the cases that they're purchased in. There are also cases that can be locked so that users can't take the DVD or CD out of the case and slip it in a backpack or a pocket to avoid checking it out. Again, this just depends on your usage. Some people take the CDs and DVDs out and put them behind the desk and just put the case on the shelf so they don't need locking cases. Some people or libraries keep the DVD or CD in the case, put it out on the shelf because they have just determined that the loss rate isn't high enough to warrant an extra expense of a lock-in case or the extra hassle of keeping the DVD separate from the case. Anyway, it's just up to what the needs of your library are. So that's why these are optional things. So the level of processing that you do should be determined by the cost of that processing versus the benefit to the long-term use of the resource. Now, we talked about shelf-ready materials when we were talking about acquisitions methods, and one way to deal with processing resources is just to have it all done by the vendor that you purchase the resources through. This will save you a lot of time. You'll need to supply the vendor with very specific directions for what you want done, and it does cost, add to the cost of the materials, and the more processing that you have the vendor do, of course, the more it will cost you. But for those libraries with limited staff help, or even volunteer help, this might be a better way to get consistent and reliable processing done. Getting the books and other materials out on the shelf quickly instead of them waiting in the back room for processing to be done. Sometimes materials get damaged, either through normal wear and tear or by user neglect. It's best to keep in mind the balance, again, of cost versus value whenever you consider whether you should repair or replace a resource. Simple repairs such as taping torn pages or tipping in a loose page can be made easily without a lot of investment of time or resources. But major repairs to the text block, because the spine is broken or the hinge is damaged and the cover is falling off, require a larger investment of time, of course, and resources, but especially time. So if you don't have volunteers or students that can do the work, it's often less costly to actually purchase a replacement or maybe a more recent addition. You'll also want to consider whether the resource that has been damaged still meets the collection development needs of the community, the curriculum, or the collection, and you might just decide to withdraw it and not replace it, or maybe replace it with a more up-to-date edition. So I've included a link in the library guide in the ILS and Preservation tab for a video that gives helpful instruction in book repair. If you're serious about repairing books, please consult the video for how to do it right and what materials to use that won't damage the resource, because the last thing that you want to do is repair a resource with materials or in a method that's actually going to damage the resource more than help with the repair. So take a look at that video. It was put out by a division in ALA, so the people that have put it together know how to repair materials correctly. You can YouTube and use YouTube to search for videos on book repair, but you have to be very careful because some of the methods of repairing are old methods that have used tools or processes that actually do damage, more damage than help. So I do recommend the video that I've linked to from the library guide. So as far as media goes, sometimes CDs or DVDs can appear irreparably damaged because they won't play, they get stuck, but sometimes you just need a quick cleaning or processing to fill in minor scratches in order to make them usable again. And you can get a device that will do that. When I worked at the public library, we actually used car wax and polished the CD or the DVD with the car wax to fill in some of the light scratches. But again, you'll want to either use the devices that are made for doing that, or find out from a reliable source how to do that yourself. And again, you know, consider the resource and determine whether it's actually worth your time to repair it, or maybe it's just something that should be weeded. So whatever you decide to do in terms of processing and repair, be sure to document your decisions in a procedure manual. So while it's time consuming to keep manuals up to date, you know, I recognize that, and I can say that I'm not the best example of keeping manuals up to date. The benefits of documented procedures are numerous. Procedures standardize things so that you're not relying on your memory to remember, well, how did we fix this before, or what decision did we make before on whether we were going to repair or withdraw. You don't have to rethink how you did something and why you did it that way, and possibly determine to do it in a different way. So this leads us to the next reason that procedures are good, and that is that it keeps things consistent, which reduces the opportunities to make mistakes and forget to do important processes. Next, procedures help with training, as it gives everyone a resource to consult if there's a question about how to do something. And it provides a checklist which students and volunteers can consult to make sure that they aren't leaving any steps undone. So procedures are very helpful, and you should try your best to keep up with your documenting your procedures and decisions that you've made. So now that you know how to process resources and what sort of processes should happen with your materials so that they can be made available for circulation, so we want to talk about the integrated library system. So before integrated library systems, or ILSs, libraries would have a card catalog that kept the records of their resources and made it possible for people to search those records. They'd have a spreadsheet, either manual or computerized, to keep track of acquisitions information, such as how much money was in the book budget, how much has been spent, how much is encumbered, which resources that were ordered have been received, all of that information. Then there'd be another system for keeping track of issues of serials that have been received, or if they haven't been received, then where you are in the claiming process. Then there'd be another system that would keep track of the resources that have been checked out and when they're due and who has them. As bibliographic records became computerized and computer systems became more user-friendly and affordable, integrated library systems were developed. That actually merged all of these systems. So what is an integrated library system? Well, it means just what it sounds like it means. All of the functions of a library are integrated into one system, one software system. The usual model is that the modules of the system are built around and make use of the bibliographic records. So the bibliographic records are at the center or the heart of an integrated library system. The acquisitions module is where you would connect the PO to the bibliographic record for the resource you were ordering. This module keeps track of the materials budget, purchases, encumbrances, returns, and receipts, as well as any materials ordered and not received. The cataloging module is the one you would use to import, create, edit, and delete bibliographic holdings and item records. Sometimes a serial module will be separate, and sometimes it's integrated into the acquisitions module because you do very similar functions with serials that you would do in acquisitions, such as tracking issues received and missing issues that you need to claim. The system anticipates when the next issue should come in and notifies you if an issue has not been received after a specified period of time. The OPAC is the public interface of the bibliographic records, and it stands for the Online Public Access Computer. This module has a search engine and a user-friendly interface that provides options for searching for materials to see what the library owns. So it's basically our card catalog on steroids. The search engine provides an index to the bibliographic record, and it searches the index. Sorry, the search engine actually searches the index bibliographic record. The next module is the circulation module, and that keeps track of patrons, which resources they have checked out, when those resources are due back, and if resources are overdue. As with the other modules, the patron information is connected to a specific bibliographic record corresponding to the item that they've checked out. And finally, a reporting module provides reports on the bibliographic records, such as how often a resource has been checked out, what titles are in a specific call number range, and this is really useful for doing inventory, which materials have a lost status, etc. All of these functions connect, as I've said before, to the bibliographic record, which is the essential element in an integrated library system. So there are two ways a library can implement an integrated library system. The first is to purchase a license to the software. With this method, there's usually an annual maintenance fee, which provides the library with upgrades to the software, some training. Support is usually included with that fee, and sometimes for an additional fee, the library can negotiate with the vendor for the vendor to actually maintain the server and be responsible for app backups, upgrades, and troubleshooting when there are problems with the server. That's a helpful way of being able to have an ILS if you don't have a lot of technological knowledge to be able to maintain the server yourself. Then there's open access ILSs. that are integrated library systems that have been created in a collaborative manner by people with that particular interest and ability, donating time to develop portions of the system. So it's a free product. However, the library assumes responsibility towards everything: upgrading the software, maintaining the hardware, backing up the system, troubleshooting, and training. This usually requires someone who's familiar and comfortable with computer systems and programming at the local library. So if that is not you, then an open access system probably is not the best way to go. I've listed some proprietary vendors and their products, and some open access products in this slide. I've included, oops, sorry, the previous slide. Oops, I lost that. Sorry, let me go back. Okay, so I've listed the proprietary vendors here, and then the open access vendors and their products here. They're also listed in the library guide with links to their websites. So for more information about the products they have available, go to the vendor or product website. So whichever system your library uses, it is important that the product has Web 2.0 functionality, meaning that users are able to interact with the data in the web page. So for OPACs, this usually means being able to for the user to write reviews of the resources, add tags, post their favorite resources to Facebook, link them to a blog, etc. Additionally, you'll want to make sure that the vendor has upgraded the product to be compatible with RDA, record elements, and has already implemented or is planning on implementing a Ferberized display, and is also planning on moving toward a linked data environment. Those things are really essential: Web 2.0 functionality, RDA compatibility, Ferberized display, and moving toward a linked data environment. So finally, it's time to say goodbye. So this is the last lecture of this course. You're all doing a happy dance right now, as am I. I've hoped you found that this course has been informative and helpful, and that you know more about libraries' collections, how libraries' collections are managed and organized. If you're ever in Murray, please stop by Waterfield Library and say hello. It would be lovely to meet you in person. Best wishes for the rest of your time in the Library Media Specialist program, and don't forget to fill out the evaluation.